Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to another Frames discussion. For our August discussion, we are kind of having a back to school edition. And so we're really excited about today's conversation. It's going to be focused on kind of the Muslim moral dilemma in the modern current education system. I know for people who are either in university, college, or they send their kids to schools, it's a conversation that I've seen happening a lot over the past year or so. Even I work in an Islamic school, and we've had a lot of kids who just want to come there, and a lot of parents are like concerned about what kids are learning in like the public schools and other private schools. And so I think it's a really beneficial conversation because obviously we live in this country and our kids are in these education systems, and we as like college students and students are in these conversations in these spaces as well. So today we have Sada Baitullah hosting as usual, and we are joined by Brother Habib Qadri, and he has a long list of, mashallah, accomplishments. So I'll just read a few of them. He is an educator, an author, and he's also a youth activist. He is a elementary school principal, and he's also a part-time staff at Harvard Graduate School of Education. He's served as board chair of MINA and CISNA, which is the Council of Islamic School of North America. He lectures here and abroad on education, and he does consulting for education as well. He's also partnered with organizations such as Iqra Foundation, and he's written a couple books. And I feel like I grew up hearing about War Within Our Hearts, Thank God It's Jama'ah, and several books, inshallah. We're going to share his YouTube channel and his socials and his website, inshallah, in the chat. But without further delay, I want to go ahead and jump to the conversation. So I'm going to invite Sada Baitullah and Brother Habib to the floor. And as usual, if you have any questions or comments that you like to make, the chat is open. This is a live discussion, so we're having the floor open. It's between Sada Baitullah and Brother Habib, but it's also between the audience. And if you are on Facebook or YouTube, please share this with anybody who you think would be interested and would benefit from this conversation. So inshallah, Sada Baitullah and Brother Habib, welcome. And I'm going to...
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وبعد. السلام عليكم حبيب.
Wa alaikum salam, Sheikh. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well, man. Good to see your shining face, man.
I'm just it's good to be here and getting to an opportunity to speak with you.
Alhamdulillah. No, I'm very excited about this conversation. As I was coming upstairs to my office, my wife reminded me that we're currently in, a battle with Chicago Public Schools just to get my son, the services he needs. So, this conversation is extremely germane for me at a personal level, in addition to all of our attendees being concerned with this, just as it concerns, I guess you could call it contemporary cultural debate, as it were, kind of some of these culture wars. But before we get started, why don't you just tell us how long you've been involved with education and how you got involved with education?
So I've been in education for more than, mashallah, 26 years. I was in the Chicago and Detroit public schools, and then I came into the Islamic schools. At the same time, I've kind of did a lot of work for Muslim community, advocate for Muslim, making sure some of the Muslim practices that they would like to practice at school. So like our local school districts, mashallah, we have Jummah prayer, Eid al-Adha, we have a meditation room, we have halal foods. So, I have the opportunity to work throughout other school districts and areas, training for, Muslim sensitivity programs. So the idea of working in education is something I enjoyed. The way how it all started is because I complained about Sunday school when I was a young kid. My mother and father both taught Sunday school. My mom still teaches for 50 years, mashallah. My father, as he got a little sick, he stopped about 10 years ago. But when I complained when I'm in 8th grade, they told me, why don't you start teaching? So I was 14 years old, taught first grade, and may Allah bless my parents. They were one of the few parents, I would say, who really promoted me going into the field. They're like, hey, I think if you enjoy it. So I, right by college, I already knew that that's where I was going to go into, that education field. But as my father said, if you're going to, I still remember his words. He goes, try to bring back the nobility in a noble profession.
Allahu Akbar. That's
He goes,
beautiful, man. That's beautiful. So currently, you're the principal of MEC, correct?
Yes. So alhamdulillah, I've just been there for some time, 16 years. And then alhamdulillah, slowly now manage a few of the buildings. So kind of like the superintendent, and we got some within some of our teachers who became administrators, and now they're become the principals. So we have like the full-time school, the Dar Ulum, we have a Saturday special needs school, and youth programs and stuff. So just try to help look over those.
So how do you understand? Because I think every Muslim family has that dilemma concerning whether or not to send their children to Islamic schools or to public schools, or is public school kind of preparation for the world that they're actually going to encounter, but you can send them to Sunday to kind of augment or supplement what they're religiously being denied, of course, in public school. How do you understand all of that?
I think for every family member, it's something that they're going to have to look at within. They need to within and say, hey, as parents, how much time and effort do you have and knowledge you have to educate and inculcate that knowledge? I'm not really worried about many of our parents making sure the academia well. They're going to make sure and get all the right things, the tutors and stuff. But from a faith-based and at a foundational aspect, I think that's where we have to look at. Many of our generation, we went to public schools. But does that mean like everything was fine and dandy? We all know our mistakes, all know some of our friends who what they've done and those challenges. But at the same time, we might have had supports from our families, through our communities, through our relatives to help navigate through the process of learning and understanding the balance of deen and dunya as you go through, and still being a firm of your identity. So, when people ask me, hey, full-time school, weekend school, or, public school, I said, look, you have to look at your school district. You need to know what resources your school has, what Islamic school you have. Do I think Islamic schools in the last 15 years have really developed? No doubt about it. Have we seen enough data of people who have graduated from it and done well? Yes. Have we some kids maybe kind of struggle? But then I also see that you could be sent to an Islamic school, but if the parents also Islamic school, they're going to be cocoon, they're going to be blocked off, and they're not going to be able to function. I said, look, I think if you grew up here, you were making sure they'll get exposed. And now with the cell phone, they have enough time to be exposed in 3rd, 4th grade. And if you look at some of our others, especially immigrant Muslims, they've come and still somehow were successful, even with the limited social knowledge, right? So that's why I think it's to me, it's about the family and saying, do you have the resources? If not, you can say, ya Allah, at least for 6 to 8 hours a day for 180 days for maybe 6 years, I try to instill some knowledge, skills, understanding of the faith, and and at the same time academia, and try to support it. Allah, hopefully I won't be questioned for it, right? So I'm not one of those that's like, man, public school, blah, 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 and here's all the vices. Everyone knows what the challenges are, and you have to look at your neighborhood. You need to look at your school district. But do I believe more than ever before that we need kids to, have a strong foundation of faith? Yes, I do. I think that many youth right now are questioning faith, and now morality and faith is something that they're pushing for kids to rethink. And I think that's where my concern is more than ever before. That the idea of having a place where you have foundational understanding of the faith. When I work with Homeland Security and some other places, there've never been any school or mosque connected to any extremism. Everyone who even went from the extreme side, so one is the liberal side or the extreme side, were all online information. It was never connected to a masajid or madrasa in America. So that also shows that with proper knowledge and understanding, they're going to have an understanding of being successful individuals here, productive Muslim, citizens of America.
No, mashallah. So those of us who do send our children to public schools, yeah, yes, right. You've told me on many occasions, Ubayd, you should send your kids to MEC. And I'm like, Habib, that would be probably 3 hours commuting every day for us, man. And that would be very difficult because MEC is in Morton Grove,
Yes,
and
sir.
we're, on Chicago's southeast side. So we've elected to send our children to public school, and we've experienced myriad challenges. Perhaps every challenge imaginable, moral challenges. I'm thinking about kind of my eldest daughter, who is a senior at Lindblom. Administrative challenges. It's been. I'm thinking about like my son, who we're trying now to enroll at Hyde Park Day School. Right? He's a diverse learner. But those are kind of our personal challenges. A lot of parents now are focused on curricular challenges, saying that there seems to be a leftist liberal agenda that not only calls into question faith and traditional morality, but seems to be promoting some of these alternative, sexual and gender identities. And this has sent shockwaves through school districts throughout the country, and has formed kind of an unholy alliance between Muslims and conservatives. I'm just kidding. I'm not judging that alliance, but we've seen this alliance between Muslims and conservatives around this issue of protecting children from indecency. I mean, where do you come down on that? How do you see that? How do you when people come and they seek your expert opinion, how do you counsel them?
This is a very good topic, and I want to kind of even step back and say, like, even before this, like this morality issue, one thing we've always tried to stress with all our kids is, right, any individual out of our faith or in our faith, there's that love, that respect and understanding, right? But at the same time, there are certain things that we do not have, as we love the person, we might respect the person, but that doesn't mean we have to accept every action of that person or the value. And then we always remind parents that, look, there's stuff like alcohol, drugs that we all grew up, going to parties, fornicating, hey, can we do this or can we not do this? And I think one of the things that challenged what's different was it was something that never was pushed and say, hey, you don't want to go to the homecoming dance or the middle 8th grade dance, you could step away. Or there's certain topics of sex ed that they might say, you for one day, hey, you don't have to be there. Or if you like to listen to or giving us alternatives, still respecting the school, the process and respecting, that curriculum. I think what's changed and why I think when people are like, why are we making this an issue? The issue is first and foremost, now it is not just a one-day awareness of, as we have awareness of various ethnicities and groups, but now the idea of accepting a lifestyle, inculcating and making it part in not even middle school, high school conversations, but now in preschool, pre-K, where a child does not have the opportunity to decipher or bring up a topic that their mind cannot comprehend. That's where our concern is. Where we had, and I think this is where that dilemma of as parents, we need to listen to our kids. We need to educate ourselves in what the school is teaching. We need to educate ourselves from a faith-based perspective. Then we need to make sure we advocate in a very respectful way to our community, our school district, and then making sure we follow up. So even that comes to even first, before we get to that one topic, I always tell parents, look, if you want your child to pray, you can't just go ahead and pray, but why not advocates like, what, is there a way that we can find a place that our kid, because not every kid's going to be like, I'm Muslim, let me go ahead and speak. So how do we go ahead and help them set up a situation that they can make themselves feel better of communicating, practicing whatever that factor is. Hey, making sure maybe eat, or for the prayer opportunity, or for letting them not feel like when I played ball to say, hey, coach, man, I need shorts long. And thank God for Jordan. Finally got, before those shorts were really small, but they're back in fashion again, for good Lord. But that idea of someone speaking on your behalf, my own daughters, going to public high school, right, playing sports and basketball, and say, hey, look, these are certain things we want to just keep you in mind, fasting and so on and so forth. Now with this topic, I know a lot of times there's hesitancy because when you say something, there could be pushback. But I think we have to, in a respectful way, in saying, well, there are some decisions that we, as even the community, the social norms of watching a movie, on certain movies rated R to watch, or PG-13 to attend, or for you to drive a car at 16, or for you to drink at 21, or to smoke at 18, that there have been certain norms that have always through time been there. Even the Surgeon General right now has talked about these phones and social media, at the age of 14, kids should not go on them because they've seen the effects. So somehow, any other factor where we realize that there could be a chance, somehow at the age of 4, 5, 6, or 8, you could pick something in many faiths where we feel it's a fitrah, that there is a distinction between sexes. And now you are going to go ahead and challenge a kid who does not understand and saying, well, you know what? I'm giving you a few options. And when has sexuality become a form of identity at that young age for us to have, where we're like, that's not even a conversation we want to even have, right? We want to respect, we want to be nice. You might have feelings, and even feelings start maybe in 4th, 5th grade. Those are, I think, where I know it's kind of a long-winded, but I wanted to kind of
No. Take your
understand
time. We're
why
here to learn from you.
This is why there's become a concern, you know. So I think that's where, you know, where I feel this is a concern with the parents, but I'm kind of making an understanding why, for anyone who's listening, like, well, why are we even making this? Because it's been before, but what is different from previous topics or social norms that we maybe had concerns with, where this is kind of, yes, another norm that we might have a concern with, but the way it's being proposed or and put inside the classrooms in the curriculum at a younger age and not informing parents about it is the concern.
You know, I think, and this would, you know, almost make me an advocate for private or Islamic education, even though I believe very strongly in public education. The public education, like, you know, one thing that every American child should be guaranteed is a quality primary and secondary education. Okay. You know, I believe that. But one thing that's really harrowing or frightening about public education, and I think this has been drawn into sharp relief by the current cultural debates, is how little control parents have over what their children learn in public schools. Like, you really have no control. I remember listening to a recording of a PTO meeting, and one board member or one administrator just straight up told a parent, I have more say over what your children should learn to do. And I think that even though perhaps that's always been the case, thinking about that should make us a little bit uncomfortable with just offering our children, you know, to educational systems that could promote ideas that we think are quite harmful, you know, for our children and to our children, you know.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that point that you bring up is the concern where, look, most of the population, everyone's going to go public schools, and I think, like, my daughter's they're all gone to public high schools, right? So they went up to K-8, and then you look at different things, right? My girls both played ball, right? At that time, our high school, we just were starting off, like, we never had a high school even in this area.
They must get their athleticism from their mother.
All right, that's what I'm talking about. My daughter, yeah, their mom played ball too. She played high school ball, so it is from there. And we still have to play one-on-one, Sheikh. So I didn't forget. You had challenged me when I was kind of, you know, not feeling well, man. But now I'm ready.
It's still on.
So everyone who's listening, Diego Bendelas called me out on a game one-on-one. So we're setting that game up. So
I'm still looking forward to it.
It's on like Donkey Kong. It's going to happen.
You know. Look, I haven't gone anywhere.
Alhamdulillah.
But no,
I think now, so there are going to be moments that, hey, look, the school district, so I think public school, I think really right now that conversation is in this early childhood elementary years where, of where you are correct. Some school districts are saying, well, you know what, we think we know what's best. And when has that ever become that a parent's right, for great quality education, but they always had control of freedom of religion to kind of have opportunities to kind of navigate in a very respectful way to say there are certain things that I feel right now we're not, comfortable. So maybe Valentine's Day, some people look, some of us might be okay, I went to some Valentine's Day, when you're in the second grade, they give you those little small things and they pass out those candies back to you. Whatever. Right. Yeah, but middle school, now I'm like, hey, there's a dad. My dad's like, that's not going to happen, right? So there are certain things that we navigate. Some might say Halloween. Some might not have an issue with that. All of us are going to have, but you had a right. Even of the same faith, some might say, I'm cool with it, with not. And the schools would be like, okay, we understand that we're asking not to change any whole curriculum, but we're saying one or two things. If on a specific day we step out, we maybe still have to do some assignment, we're good. Just like swimming class, right? My father, even not just my sister, even for me, said no swimming class if it's not separated, right? So those conversations, now some might have not had an issue with it. Those are kind of things that I think that's where the key point is, and saying, hey, now it's taken away and they're deciding what we think is best. And in the agenda of not from, hey, kids will be asked what they would like to be called by and not be informed to the parents that if your child does pick something than the regular gender that their parents want them to be recognized even in first, second grade. That's where it's becoming problematic. And where we have to be advocating and say, look, we have love, respect for the schools, this and that, but where's our also religious freedom to make, give that, and without being called anti so and so.
Yeah, no, I think that, it's very hard for those pushing those views to hide the ideological character of all of this. This seems natural or innate or intrinsic to being a child, right? It seems like this is something that is being grafted onto American childhood. Like the idea of people debating such serious matters with regard to sex and gender expression at the age of 6 or 7, it really seems rather extreme. And the fact that this, in the name of tolerance, in the name of acceptance, in the name of inclusivity, has been accepted by so many school districts, it's really mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling, right? It's mind-boggling. And those of us that, are religious but respect pluralism, like we respect plurality, in the American body politic, it would be unthinkable for us to think that we were going to somehow, talk about Islam in a way that sought to make children more comfortable with converting to Islam. Like we would naturally feel that, this is okay in a private setting, but in a public setting, this could be overstepping the boundary. The fact that some people are willing to do that about, sexuality and gender and some of these other kind of axial questions is really like, wow.
Right. And I think, and that's what we want to be very clear, even especially with our own kids, right? Because now they're, they have good, there's been many years there, I went to college, and there are individuals who same-sex attraction. Respect, even one of them, I would just be like, hey, what's going on? We're friends, cool, respect, colleagues, whatever those conversations are. So there's no issue. And I think that's what we want to bring up and say, like, hey, this is not about the person and what they want to do in the private matters. This is about now, you will never in first grade or preschool, pre-K go, hey, well, you know what? There's another faith if you like to believe in, you're okay with. Never a question like that. Right. So so that's where our thing is that, look, we're not coming here trying to be homophobic and that the idea is that can our parents instilling whatever values we perceive or we prefer, and then kind of giving that opportunity. So, because even now you have some schools, some states where even, and this is not just like a Muslim, there's other people of other faiths who also have a concern where now a child, if they feel like they want to transition, and you talk to a social worker, that they could get this without the parents' permission. And how can someone at that young age, when we're going through so many changes, I want to be this player, I want to be that, how many of us even for college did not know what we want to be, even from a professional setting? Or even when you're young, your imaginations grow creative, you want to do this, you want to do that. There's always been, time for us to kind of reflect and say, by you at this certain age, you are mature not to make that decision. Even now, as I started off with alcohol, drinking, watching movies, there are certain times that psychological research said your cognitive, the frontal lobe is not even completely formed until the age of 25, right? So, and that before 25, many young kids, their impulsivity is high. That's why young kids make mistakes. Why did you do it? I don't know. But now you're telling them that they can change something about them, which could affect them for the next 40 years of their life, and not have parents discussion is where that problem is. And this is where I think we as individuals have to educate our own kids and understand it from a religious standpoint, because sometimes kids even have this, I remember someone's like, I was at a school, like, well, the Muslims, well, I heard this one place that they stoned this one man because he was same sex. I said, first of all, you could get anything on National Geographic about one country, this country. But I said, from a religious standpoint, tell me one hadith where the prophet said, hey, find me these individuals, let's go and get them. Never. I said, the prophet, the worst sin in our deen is associating someone with God. And the prophet knew who the hypocrites were, and he still kept it to himself. When he was 9 years old, one of the few people, keep an eye on these guys. We call them all out, right? So when I try to tell kids and our young ones, I'm saying, look, our deen is beautiful. It's ideas that we're going to be respectful, and even if God's going to maybe make that decision with that individual. The idea is if there are some rules, but even heterosexuality, we're not supposed to promote it out open and saying it's okay. So this is not about the LBGT. This is about, for any other factors, even if alcohol, no high school ever says, I think you should start drinking. In 8th grade, no, not even high school, right? It's mostly like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, all these other factors. So any other part of our lives, no one's ever kind of pushing a certain value that they might, or even become, because out of respect, knowing that, hey, kids are, that's something that after 18, 19, you will make those decisions. And so that's concern.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. I want to switch gears just a little bit. We had to get that bit, out of the way, because I'm sure many people tuned in based on the title that we gave to the conversation, expecting to hear you opine about, curriculum and LGBTQ issues. But I want to talk about Islamic education and talk about some of the challenges to diversity, in Islamic education, right? So take, for instance, MEC. It's in Morton Grove, and I've given khutbah, mashallah. The students, they come from the high school to the khutbah. It's a good opportunity for them to catch up on some sleep when I'm giving the khutbah, right? And I think I've done at both IFS, these are local Chicago Islamic schools, and MEC, I've done some programs during the day as well. And I was impressed with the diversity of the student body. You had some young, Arab American kids, you had Indian American kids, you had, an occasional convert here or there, but I didn't see, at least what I could perceive as, a lot of socioeconomic diversity, right? Most of the students tended to live in the general vicinity of the school, right? And I think this is the case with most schools. Most students live in the general vicinity of their schools. So for students that are Muslims, families that, have Muslim children
Mhm.
that maybe wouldn't mind that commute, how do we, promote a kind of diversity that, could confront certain social economic barriers to something like private education or Islamic education?
Yeah, no, I think it's very important that it has to happen. So we're kind of like unique. We're in the north side of Chicago. So alhamdulillah, we have about 900 kids from 51 different countries, right? We have a whole demographic study when you have that. So we represent 51 countries. In teaching, we have 28 different countries. So alhamdulillah, but we're unique because we're on the north side of Chicago, right? So it's more diverse, right? Because you have the city.
Mhm.
But one of the things is that we also have certain scholarships for certain new refugees that come in. So when the Burmese community came, we went to the district and said, okay, we need 3-4 spots. Find some of your students that could really change their trajectory for their families. So I think we have to have certain concerned efforts to say certain communities we've asked and say, hey, who do you have that you think would be great opportunities of giving scholarships and so on and so forth? Because even like a lot of Islamic schools, about 34, like we got about 30% of our populations, there's scholarships going here and there because we have to, right? And I think slowly more and more as schools are realizing, you want to have, and it first started. I think now that we've seen schools develop, and because some other schools have developed, and the ones starting up, they don't have to reinvent the wheel because they can learn from others. And so I think this point of really, alhamdulillah, even our board, we've tried to make some efforts to say if someone, making sure even people who's imams at other schools, other masajids, if their kids want to come to have that, we have to give them a discount. Because if we're working in a nonprofit, we have to then do something to give them opportunity, because you don't want the ones who, because they go to nonprofit, might not have the salaries to take care of, to pay for school tuition. So I think those kinds of efforts now on a board level that we're going to have to say, well, let's look at our school. How do we make it more diverse? Is that opportunity there? If not, what are we doing to make it easy for individuals, right? So even when we had someone that we were kind of looking at, well, how do we get some people from even different driving, right? So we had some conversations once with 2 massages up in the south side, like, hey, is that something? Can that work? Then we're like, hey, do you want to help out start a school there? Those kind of things, I think now we have to be like, all right, if there isn't something around, can we help them kind of from a busing standpoint, or for making sure there's some spots available from a financial standpoint, or do we do it from resource standpoint of going there and say, hey, can we develop something in that neighborhood also?
We need Habib. We need to talk, man. We need to talk. We need to talk. There's a lot of opportunity. What's that?
I said, you're a busy man, but you got my cell phone, Sheikh, so
Bismillah, I give you buzz. No, I give you buzz. No, I mean that's good to hear. I think that one of the characteristics of a good community. I mean, I always tell people, look, we believe in tafadul fil arzaq, that Allah gives rizq to people, and there's disparity in the rizq. Some people are given a great deal. Some people are given more modestly. That's we don't believe that there has to be the imposition of sameness in people's resources, right? However, I don't think that there should be disparity in certain quality of life indices. So like getting a good education should not be contingent upon being wealthy. Right? Maybe driving a fancy car, that could be contingent on being wealthy, or living in a palatial home, that can be contingent upon being wealthy. But being able to access quality food, being able to access responsive healthcare, being able to access quality education, it really shouldn't matter. And I think that if Muslims want to make a contribution to the common weal, WEAL, like just weal, this is a place that we could really put our foot down, man. This is a place that we could really, I think, impact contemporary society.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, and it's something that ourselves, personally, I have to say, in my own institution, we can always get better at, and it's something that has to be open and look at, and that's why we even, I think, every 3-5 years we have a strategic plan, and that's, I think, even about 10-15 years we kind of look at something and say, hey, you know what, is mostly Southeast Asian and Arab, right? Most Islamic schools. And so, well, how do we make sure to keep that diversity? Even it's great because my secretaries, one is Irish, one is Filipino, the other school is Latin American, the other one's Eritrean. So how do you have that? And I realized Islamic schools now helps bring everyone together. So I just went to like 4 of our alumni marriages. It was a Bosnian with the Syrian, then it was a Pakistani with the Bosnian, right? So you kind of start seeing, all these individuals got, this kind of, so alhamdulillah. Now what it does also is when you're coming here, you're learning the deen. He's like, as my father said, he goes, I learned my faith in America than I did back home, right? And now in Islamic schools, what you have to do is you got like 51 different countries, you got to separate culture aspect and say, what is faith, right? Gives us a better understanding. And I think that helps people say, okay, where do we move forward? And now a lot of us were all growing up here. This is where, inshallah, Allah decides, but many of us might be, our lives will be, most of our lives here and end here, right? So, Allah give us righteous life.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. No,
so it's a solid point, Sheikh.
No, alhamdulillah, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about. We've talked about it in the past, so I wanted to, I wanted our viewers to know that people at the administrative level are thinking about our community intentionally, thinking about how they can expand and broaden the different categories and demographics of people that they're able to reach and serve. Of course, there are many logistical and structural barriers to execution, but at the very least, the fikr, right, the concern, right, that imperative is something that we acknowledge, and that's a very good thing. Real quick, man. So those of us who are kind of restricted to public education, either because of our resources, or like in my case, because of our spatial placement, right? We're just not. I mean, an hour and a half. That's a long way. That would be, rush hour traffic.
Right.
Hour and a half this way. Hour and a half this way. That would be a lot. Those of us who do have children in public schools, what advice can you give us to inoculate our children or just protect them? Or, how should we be guiding them, counseling them, assisting them, aiding them?
Right. So number one, I think first we have to listen to them, and having it's about communication, open communication to say, hey, so after like having open communication, so at least figure out they have an opportunity to feel comfortable to share and talk to them. With open communication, the second aspect becomes then the idea of listening and then educating them, because you have to have them understand and have a foundation of your faith, also your own personal values and expectations. So communicating with them, making them educating your deen, but also your expectations of your child. Like, what do you want your child? I want you to make sure academically do this. Well, then if you want that, what are you providing, advocating for them are the resources for them to be successful, right? So if it's from a faith-based perspective, yes, listening, educating, advocating, setting up the resources for that skill set or that value to be reinforced. I think that becomes a big part. Now, at the same time, what we're going to have to say is that parents, you have to come together, because we have to speak up. If there's something like you see, there are some ethnic groups and so on, so are organizations or groups of people where if they want something, they are going to make sure everybody knows about it. And I think we have to, in a very respectful way, in a very understanding and thought-provoking way of making sure if there are certain things in the curriculum or in the policy or in the procedure, in the discussion, we have to be very clear. It's just like when I grew up in the 90s, in history books, it used to say Muhammadism. And some of the things about Islam were not correct facts. And through time, we had to be advocates for that to be cleared and understood and then rewritten. And I think there are other, as we are growing and being more active and civically engaged, we are noticing there are more other factors, right? So you have some schools where I remember in high school, Bond Stephen High School, I was like, freshman year, you know, I was like, okay, we're just, some of us went and prayed like at someone's house. But then I was like, my sophomore year, got to, you know, play ball at a high level. I felt confident, said, we're going to start Jumu'ah. And spoke to a coach and said, we're going to start Jumu'ah prayers there. And after that, we told another individual, Azhar Osman in Oz West. He started one. And then from it trickled up having MSA at the high school level. We have to take steps, right? Freshman, sophomore year, my shorts were quite, you know, quite small. Right? Felt embarrassed to tell anyone, right? But at a certain time, I have to, you know, I wore shorts and I cut them, right? And then sewed them, right? I think Jordan saw me one time, and that's why he took the idea. I made $1 billion, and I became a principal. Too bad for him, right? But the idea of learn, you know, kind of taking steps, right? And I think for right now, we've had like in 1990, like Bilqis Qadir, right? For her to what she did for the hijab, which maybe was here, but from FIBA, not even until like 10 years ago, you could not wear a scarf and play in a national, international basketball, association. So I think when people kind of make that push, or we had that girl who went into the ESPYs because she was running, and you know, they in a regional track meet, and they disqualified her for wearing a scarf in cross country. From God's sake, like there's no, you know, those are kind of things that we have to have people who have to make that extra push. And the push in a very respectful way, because it opens up floodgates. And I think sometimes we have to keep on knocking at the door, hitting at the wall for it to finally open up or break some ceilings that we need to. And I think we've seen that in things from corporate America. But now as schools, we also have to see and, you know, express in a very supportive way our concerns and kind of share that. Because, you know, so that, you know, I think inshallah, I think those are, you know, things that more and more it's very important for communities and people to understand how important that could be. I think we just lost the Sheikh, so I
think we lost him. We're going to try to get him back. Oh, here we go. There we go. Alhamdulillah.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. I was like, maybe I'm talking too much. Sheikh just like, I'm gonna drop.
Yeah, for me to call somebody overly talkative will be like the pot calling the kettle metal. Couldn't happen. But no. But before we left, you were talking about just being proactive.
Yes, sir.
Making expectations known to your children, and you were talking about your shorts and how before you used to kind of cut them off and then sew some of the extra fabric.
Yeah, so the whole idea, the advocating and resource, right? You have to, and sometimes, and that's why I try to tell parents, like, not every kid is going to be like all exciting, right? You know, so, you know, like, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So we have to look and be honest with our own kids and say, what can I do to just help bridge that gap to whatever support that they need? And that's why if you're in the public schools, you have a right to just like, hey, I want to know. And if not, then you get a group of 4 or 5, you know, parents and saying, hey, in a very respectful way, in finding out, hey, what if there are some concerns, are there certain things that we do need? And it has to start somewhere, right? From the idea, from Jummah, Eid breaks, not, you know, respected. There's been other factors that have come through, and there's going to be other challenges and topics that might come. And this is why I think it's so important that, you know, really having relationship with our kids is more important than ever before. We have to have open communication. Dads with daughters, it's on. You have to build those relationships and making sure that there is a line. And when something does, sometimes they make a mistake, you have a right to be disappointed, but I don't want it to be where you close off, that they don't come back to you and ask again, because you know, that disappointment comes to a point where I'm embarrassed and I don't want to talk to you. Never lose hope in your kids. And you know, Allah's help is always there. You know, hasbi Allahu ni'mal wakeel. We just do our best. Allah will take care of the rest.
Allah Akbar, no, beautifully stated. Now, up until this point, conversation has assumed a certain shape, right? We've talked about kind of Islamic schools, and then and kind of everything, all of the strides that Islamic schools are making. Many of them you're very aware of, you're privy to as a principal of an Islamic school. And we've talked about the challenges of public schools, you know, curricular challenges, cultural challenges, religious challenges. let's turn that around a little bit. What challenges Islamic schools are currently facing? What are some of the challenges you're seeing for students at Islamic schools?
Like, I mean, so we look at various things. You know, one no doubt about it is how do we make sure that you keep the tuition so low, but at the same time, so everyone can attend, but at the same time, how do you take care of the teacher salaries, right? So from a financial standpoint, that becomes right. And I know some people are like, well, that's because you don't pay the right teachers, you're not going to get the quality teachers. I beg to differ that sometimes there are people who make some sacrifices for the sake of doing it, but how do we, as school administrators and school boards, try to make sure that not just Islamic schools, all Muslim nonprofits, that there's the salaries at a point that people it's reasonable for them to live on, right, and accommodate, and so they can really maximize their potential as they're teaching. So that becomes one from a financial standpoint. Then you have the other aspect where sometimes academia standpoint, which I feel in the last several years, I mean, there's so much resources online that you could get all the resources where maybe 15, 20, 30, about 20 years ago, harder. But I think that the academic of challenging and making sure, and that becomes sometimes where some Islamic schools, like alhamdulillah, has blessed me to visit about 80 to 100 schools in the United States. Yes, there are places we have small towns, which I don't want to use, but small towns in the South areas where there might not be that many teachers. So they go through those tough challenges. Facility becomes the third aspect of it, right? So you have teachers sometimes, the finance, the facility. Then the fourth, sometimes you have kids where they don't have resources, right? So you might have the academic resources, but I always tell people, and even a lot of our boards and other boards I go visit, for kids, it's a sense of belonging that motivates kids, right? The hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy of needs after food, water, and shelter, everybody wants to belong. So having athletic programs, after school programs is huge. Creativity, all those other arts that people like play a big part. So how do you make sure that you could give them those opportunities to blossom and do that? I like even my own daughter, right? As an eighth grader, she was like, hey, I want to keep playing ball, right? And if you want to, she wouldn't have a team. So that was something that I was like, hey, don't want to close that opportunity for her to, yes, could be travel, but just the idea of kind of going and playing. So those become kind of conversation pieces that people might have. So after school programs could be there. Then sometimes there are ideas like, hey, the sports teams that they don't have that. Then even faith, I think it's very important that one of the things that we're trying to see in the last 10 years, some schools, is not about just knowing rote information. The deen is about akhlaq and character. It's about experiential learning. It's about how you as a Muslim can interact and throughout your life and working is also your deen. Like, I always tell people, like, if you play ball, young man, and you don't cuss, and when you're mad, Allah's going to reward you for that. That when you just say Bismillah before you play, Allah rewards you for that. When you're with your boys and you decide to not do that, make a decision, go to that one place you shouldn't be, or being disrespectful to just some guys are being disrespectful to some individual, and you step away, you get hasanat for that. So, right, I think the idea of inculcating that's a way of life, and that this idea of the akhlaq, the muamalat, that is a big thing in our faith. I think those are the new pushes, and just kind of memorize. I mean, you got to get your foundation, memorization, all that, but really saying, how do you really build Muslim individuals who are proud to be American, proud to be Muslim, and be, and navigate through a country which I personally love and enjoy.
MashaAllah.
Concerns, as even family, we love our family, but there's always still issues everyone always has. We love our country. There's policies I'm not happy with, but I really want our kids to understand, like, how do we, this is part of our deen. The Prophet loved the people of Quraysh. He made dua for them. We need to kind of keep those things in mind. So that's kind of like, I think that one of the other factors of faith-based is trying to have, as now more and more of our young shuyukh are now become ulama and now teaching and having an opportunities play a big part. I think is with all these new challenges and stuff that people are coming up with, questioning God, atheism is on the rise, answering questions about evolution, so on and so forth. So we're kind of rewriting curriculums on these certain things, which is not just for the full-time schools, for weekend schools, for halakas, which may Allah bless Yaqeen for doing certain many things, and other organizations that we're kind of pushing and trying to having these responses for people.
MashaAllah, at Alim, the shameless plug, the vast majority of our students are people that are either in college or just graduated high school. And, Alim is a good site for critically engaging Islam in a faith-affirming environment,
Mm,
a space that will allow students to ask some of those questions that have been gnawing kind of at
mm,
their
mm,
conscience,
mhm,
but with teachers who not only can engage those questions critically, but will engage them in a way that intentionally seeks to fortify their iman. So,
mm.
we really would like to see ourselves as kind of the natural destination of people leaving Islamic high schools, or people that have gone to Sunday school, people that have received solid religious educations in their homes, etc. But I wanted to ask you, right, because we're going to open up for questions in just about 10 minutes. The real questions are coming from the attendees, right? I'm someone who is quite fond of you, fond of your work. So everything I'm lobbing you is just a softball, except this question.
Yes, sir.
What about people who say, and I've talked to certain people about this. They say, I sent my children to Islamic school, and a lot of the moral dilemmas were the exact same as public school: dating, drugs, racism, classism, misogyny, right, sexism, you name it. They say, additionally, the thing is, when I see those things in public school, I can say to my children, well, they're not Muslim, we are. So that's it. But when I see those things in Islamic school, I don't have that convenient explanation, because no, these are our co-religions. Of course, you can talk about, well, Islam is perfect, Muslims aren't, they're human beings. This is an opportunity to accept them, appreciate the best of them over the worst of them, etc. But the initial question there, Islamic school is no utopia. You guys still deal with, many, issues. How are you handling those issues?
Yeah, so I think I think you hit on the point. First of all, sending to any Islamic school doesn't mean anything. You can send them to a madrasa, you can send them overseas, you could go to any country. There's going to be mistakes and there's going to be challenges all over, right? I felt sometimes more secure than I was in some Muslim countries, right? You can't even go to some massages without people assuming something, right? If you went to the masjid and you said us a few words or had a conversation, or even a halakha, so that by itself, it's there anywhere. I think one of the things also, we have to realize, see, you have kids coming at various ages, various groups, and various backgrounds. So one of the things that what parents have to say, when you start Islam school, doesn't mean that everyone's on the same page, right? Everyone comes in with their own biases, prejudices that they have, because we have to get this whole thing out there in the Muslim world, and even in our own, we have challenges. And that's why having topics where we have to be open and saying, what are some of our mistakes? What are, and I think that helps us navigate and say, how do we go through some of these? Because even when I first got there, I had the opportunity to meet with some specific individuals from different groups and stuff and say, oh, this is what we thought, this is what our experience was, which is good. And there still might be, because you might still have several kids, but there might be one or two kids just come and say something. And sometimes some language that was used at home, now they didn't realize that especially with the African American community, like there are some in NOPAC or in the Arab community, there are words that sometimes became almost part of the norm. So now someone might be using, like, wait a minute, I don't even, because, so I think those are very important, that there are going to be challenges. Drugs, alcohol. Look, first, any kids here, they're youth. They still want to try something. They want to be the unique one. They want to be different. They want to be that rebel. So can it happen? No doubt about it. But I think what Islamists could do is that, hey, there's an opportunity to at least where you're being reminded, but now parents have to parent. Some parents, what they do is just kind of drop it off like, oh, now my job's done. This is just the idea. Just like you could go to a great school district, you send them there, but you also have to make sure, hey, young man, you got to wake up for school on time. You got to study. You got to, balance your sports, have fun, video games. If you want to be successful, you can have the whole great plan of action, but everyone has to buy in and do their part. Same thing in faith is that it's not just memorizing, because what happens is that it can become hypocritical or an assignment for kids. I see this all the time where you have a kid, He's like, well, yeah, I pray, but my dad doesn't pray at home. So it's just Zohar Salah is just an assignment, right?
Wow.
But if you don't see things come together, then it becomes a problem. But I look at it as it helps your kids know more than you maybe did. It helps you take something and run with it, because now they have some foundational things, and now you are able to kind of decorate it, kind of massage it, put the water on it, make it grow the way you want, right? And all of us have our own views of what's acceptable, what's not, right? So that's why I always tell people, like, well, because even when I first got there, again, 51 different countries, so you have people like, well, how you have pictures of faces up here? I'm like, well, sometimes for historical purposes and so on and so forth. There, we have native dean and some musicians. Some people might have issues with that. We sometimes want someone to pledge allegiance, or some people might have issues with that, right? But there are certain things that we all try to navigate, knowing that everyone's going to have different views. But how do you go through? Plus the vices. That's why even in middle school we have to talk about the dating, the clubs. I remember when in our book, War in Their Hearts, and we had that chapter on pornography. People are like, what are you doing? I'm like, it's a chapter. It's. What do you think? It doesn't happen?
Yeah,
I said,
of course it happens.
Give everyone that one of these by the age of 3rd grade and don't have any things on it. What do you think is happening? But now everyone's like, no doubt about it, right? Some other topics that we've talked about earlier regarding morality, some of the new things that are coming out right now in the world, or even at public school districts. Those are conversations you have to start out in 3rd, 4th grade. Maybe that might have been nothing. So middle school, high school. So I think those are things that we have to develop. No doubt about it. Like, and you have some parents where they use this as like a place just to kind of keep them locked in, but sometimes those are the ones that explode, right?
Yeah.
Freedom. Right? So how do you have that balancing act? And that's the beauty of our deen. It is such a balance, but sometimes we as people have not done a great job. But that just can't be an excuse. So I would first want to say, when people come in, I'm like, this is not your solution, but this can be a process. And part of the goal of what you want to achieve with your child, inshallah, with Allah's help, and then kind of giving some foundational things that maybe at up to 8 hours a day for 180 days. There's sometimes you're making du'as and salahs that hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if the shepherd's good to the sheep, even if the sheep gets lost, he'll find his way back home. And that's what
it's a very effective way of planting the seed.
Yes.
And when we plant a seed, it's not us that makes it grow. It's Allah that makes it grow. But we make our effort, and we just want to put our children in good environments where at the very least they can be empowered to do good.
For sure.
Right.
For
but I can be empowered to do good. Now, nobody expects anyone's childhood to be perfect.
Yes.
If everyone's childhood was perfect, nobody would ever learn hard lessons.
Yeah.
Right. And I'd assume that's the same at Islamic school or public school, but the environment at Islamic school encourages people to be good in ways that we promote and we endorse as Muslims.
Yeah, because it's an uphill battle, especially now. It's an uphill battle, right? To be exact, I remember in public school, it's cool to be bad, right? It was just that it was like kind of like, you don't do this, like what's wrong with you, right? So it was like kind of not like the norm. It was like kind of what's
I see that. Well, I mean, how would you respond to the challenge that? Okay, so how did your children transition from doing primary school, right, K through 8 in middle school, in an Islamic kind of school environment, and then going into a public high school? Was the culture shock unbearable? I mean, clearly they're managing it, but how was that experience for you all?
And so that's why it's so much on the parent, right? Because we went out, they played at like park districts, so they played travel. I'm quite, active in community. So the idea is like, we don't keep them in a bubble. We want them to realize, but now you have a place where you're just positively understanding your faith, learning your faith, and keeping that environment. Now they're going to navigate through. So that's why we walk around like, I might be different. I'm like, hey guys, so now you're in high school, like, okay, what's your kind of musician that you like? Blah, blah, blah. Harry Styles, let me figure this out. Okay. Where are you with this? Those are conversations you need to have, even in clothing. Even my own daughter in 8th grade asked me and said, hey, Baba, are you going to be mad if, can I ask you a question? I said, yes. She goes, are you going to be mad that I'm not going to, wear a scarf? right? If I don't wear a scarf, I said, do you think it's a commandment of Allah? And then she said, yes. I said, okay, that's what's important to me. That stage is going to be when you decide, right? Because I have to look at family members that she's seen and so on and so forth. They're going to at different stages. My sister started in college. My wife started in college, right? There are various things. I said, look, that's going to be your moment, but salah and some factors. So we have to have those things of talking to them. And I think it is so much now. If you just kind of had this and you didn't go anywhere else, have that as only much and nothing else, yeah, there's going to be some shock. But I'm a big believer when you go to public school, you still try to go to school. There's at least a few Muslims around.
Yep.
Right. I tell you, I wish I could tell a high school man I was just had the fear of Allah and that's why I didn't want to do something. Sometimes I just knew that someone's going to see me. I'm not going to do it. Like, you got to be honest, right? I feel a lot of people in places, so you don't do it. Right. And so sometimes, like, oh man, just don't walk Allah. Like, oh, man, Allah, mashallah. But now everyone's all like, it just happens, right? You go, it comes afterwards.
Sometimes, the pressure to conform to a good norm is that's the best you can expect from a child. Yeah. Right? Maybe that young person has yet to realize that deep kind of personal relationship with Allah, but man, I don't want anybody to tell my father that I was out here at the football game behind the bleachers smoking a cigarette.
Right.
Man, I don't want anybody to hear about that. So no, mashallah. So we have about 25 minutes left. Sure. We want to open the floor to anybody who might want to ask a question related to our conversation or to our broadly. Mashallah, man, I've heard Habib lecture about education generally and Islamic education specifically on a number of occasions, and I've always found his commentary to be enlightening. I've always found him to be informed and intelligent and very clear in his delivery. So if anybody has a question that they'd like to pose from the audience. So Maysa Masuri said, how do we address this issue to children exposed or asking about these topics of gender?
So I think one aspect, you have to look at the age group and you have to see how much they're exposed to, right? And then I think that's where you have to look and then navigate and say, okay, how much can they really comprehend? And then at the same time, after I don't know which age group this might be, but if there are sometimes a little bit, I think one of the things reaffirm and say, hey, look, Allah loves us and Allah has created us for male and female, right? And you're a boy and you're a girl, and Allah would be proud of that. And I think that, especially in those lower grades, it's something that maybe we never thought about before, but we have to reaffirm that Allah has made you a boy and you're proud, Allah has made you a girl, and this is the blessings of being a girl, and these are the blessings that you get, and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. I think, and also seeing that at the home to really talk about the gender, how our deen talks about gender, the roles of gender, what the expectations of the genders are. Something that you might have been like, okay, that's just going to come through life, is now something that you might have to have an earlier conversation about, right? And I think that's something that we have to kind of have those discussions that maybe we're not going to be before, and I think those are unique things that I was dealing with a family member, someone, like a community member, and they were calling and saying, hey, they had this one family, and now you had a child in the lower grades where they're putting nail polish or dressing up because their teacher does that, and I want to be like my teacher. My teacher said I could be whoever I want to be. So those are stuff that you might have in first grade maybe never thought about. Now this parent's like, wait a minute, I have a conversation. I need to kind of say, all right, maybe when we were young, we kind of joke around one time, someone put something on us, I remember, and then you might just do that as a fun thing. But now that becomes a question where maybe it would have been, oh, okay, it's fun. You want to put on nail polish, your sister has a joke, to wait a minute, now can this be some continuation, or is this something more? And I think that's where this conversation, what could be like, I'm gonna wait until 5th grade. I'm like, no, you need to listen. That's why that whole thing I said, we got to keep the communication and listening and seeing with radars what's popping up and have that conversation. Just like when my own kids, when they were young, it was Native Dean, Zane Bika, all that. And I knew, even for me, I'd be like, oh, right. But But when I knew that now music is going to be more important, I'm like, okay, what are you going to listen to? Let's have this conversation.
Sure.
Where it's okay, I'm okay, but where's the cutoff, right? Cuss words, this and that. Hey, this is where I need you to understand. Some singers look where they're going. They're just gone nuts, right? So I think those conversations have to say, look, hey, this Lil Nas started here, but guess what? It's going. I need you to be very careful what you're listening to. So I might not, again, I'm not a scholar, so I'm not going into like how music, but I have to have conversations saying, okay, this is where it's cool. Let's be open, not be like, my kids will never do it. No, we're watching. Okay, you know what? TV. I prefer Netflix. Can you tell me which ones? And we're going to put these parameters. My kid, like, I don't believe phones until they get to high school. So like, alhamdulillah, we were able to block there, but even TV or stuff, I'm like, well, you know what? It has to be here, or the laptop has to be in the living room. You can't be in your room and watch, right? Now, as you get high school, it changes. So those are conversations at every age we have to be cognizant, and every kid is different, right? Honestly, my father, I think kind of, like, even though I thought it was tough, maybe it was the best thing for me. When I even traveled, play ball, he told the coach, I want him, he has to roommate with you. I was like, what? Right. So, and this is before cell phones. So he called me like at Fajr 6:30 in the morning. The second we were like in Phoenix, and then like my coach like, we gotta stay with the roommate. My dad's like, I'm like, Dad, coach said I have to stay with them. He called me like at 10:30 at night, 11 o'clock to make sure I didn't leave the room. So those are conversations you need to have, like this idea of like, oh, I trust my kid. I'm sorry, you have to have some port. Like I'll take my son. He's in high school. I'm like, I just need to look over it. Right. I have that screen share. I put the thing in so that way he can't delete anything. Because I just want to make sure where you on.
No, mashallah. No, this is
right. Like I don't like even my own self. Like we have a password. I'm like, I don't trust my own self, right? So you got to have these conversations. I love all of us. So I think So the age group, it's all everywhere, and you just got to be listening to where do you think you are and what are the challenges. So all of us know our challenges, and all of us know our own vices. And some of those vices our kids might have because they're part of our genetics. So you just got to have it. You have an anger issue, just realize I have that. All of us know who we are. I was a social person, so I'm gonna keep an eye on all my kids, right? So like you just gotta be like, so subhanAllah. So
mashallah. No. And one way that this specific question that Mesa was asking about gender expression, one way that I talk to my children about it, because I have my eldest is 17, and then I have an 8, soon to be 9-year-old, and I have a 7-year-old. And this year, this summer, they were in camp at the Hyde Park Neighborhood Club. And one of their fellow campers, my daughter, my youngest, she said, well, Dad, she's a girl, but she has a boy mind. Right? And I said, Keita, that's a strange thing to say. What do you mean by that? I said, well, she looks like a girl, but inside, she's a boy. That's how I said, did you come up with that on your own, or is that what someone told you? She said, that's what somebody told me. Right? And I said, I actually, helped her to understand through kind of talking about openness. I said, actually, you don't have to have a boy mind or a girl mind in that way. If a young boy doesn't like football and likes cooking, that doesn't mean he has a girl mind. It just means he has a very specific kind of boy mind. And if a girl prefers, bike riding and roughhousing and wrestling, and she likes the color blue and, more than she likes the color pink, it doesn't mean that she has a boy mind. It just means that she has a very specific kind of girl mind. Right. And my daughter was like, yeah, it is strange that we would say this is a boy mind or this is a girl mind. Right. That is rather strange. But it's never too early to have those conversations when we need to have those conversations. Right.
You just brought up, like, I'll give you another example. I had this one young lady came and said, hey, mom's like, oh my God, she says she's bi. And then, we were having a conversation and she goes, well, I'm like, hey, where does that come? She's like, well, she goes, hey, I have a friend and, and we were talking, and then she goes, where my friend goes, oh my God, what? Yeah, she's like, oh, she looks cute. So she goes, oh, if you think she's cute, then you're bi. But she's like, because I like boys, but I have that. I said, look, I said, you know, there's guys who dress, you know, sharp, like, you know, like clothing, and like, you know, mashallah, Saadu Bela, you look sharp, right? I'm like, that's a smooth looking guy. That's just respect. Like, he looks a smooth looking guy. Doesn't mean I have feelings for him. So I asked her, did you have feelings for her? Like, and she's like, no, I just said she was nice. I'm like, so but isn't that because now even how they're trying to, you know, like to kind of have that definition and clarify does not mean I'm like, look, but that just means you have a right to say, mashallah, this person looks nice. She looks nice. She looks cute. That does not mean that, hey, now you have this innate feelings of urge and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of times, because now it's also this fad of cool just to be a part. So I think having these conversations and be like, what do you mean? Don't get mad. Just be like, I can't believe this, right? And that's why I tell parents too, I'm like, don't jump on the gun. First, to try to figure out what they even thought of something. Where did that conversation even begin? Right. And then you'll be like, oh, okay, wait a minute. Okay. Then I was like, you know, parents, I'm like, let's just calm down. You know, let's listen to the child. Right.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, for a lot of us, we're probably in disbelief that we're having these conversations so early. Right. And, but have to have the conversation because out there or in schools, or as in my case, at camp, people are having the conversations.
Yeah.
Right. People are having the conversation. So very good question, Mesa. I hope that helps. We have, how can Muslims in universities navigate the secular environment and curriculum that is being pushed?
At the university levels? I mean, like so university, like, I mean, you're independent, you know, you take your class, you don't. I mean, there are going to be certain things now. Look, all of us who live in corporate America, when I go to public school settings or universities, you have to, again, I'm not a scholar, but there are some things that are become norms in the sense of conversations or emails and certain things you need to do. You kind of follow through, and there's certain things that you could navigate. I think at the older age, there's a lot more where you can make independent decisions. I feel, unless again, some things might have changed in university. But in the you know, so my focus mostly in the early, you know, lower grades where I could see where there's concerns about upper grades. There are going to be certain norms now become aspect, but as long as it's, you know, also when I talk to youth and saying, all right, hey, there are certain things like, okay, MSAs and sponsorships and stuff like, hey, we're going to work with different coalitions and so on and so forth. Now we just have to look at, as ulama says, that, hey, are you supporting some coalition or club where there might be promoting something that might go against the parameters of our deen, right? You know, the basics foundation of our deen, and that becomes something like we have to step away. But there, you know, as I said, you know, work with individuals and so on and so forth, you know, individuals with different faiths, different backgrounds, different values. It's about, you know, as they respect me, I respect them. So I think that's there. So I don't know, in the sense of the college curriculum, unless you're taking some courses, but sometimes, you're in sociology and stuff. So those are going to be more conversations that there are going to be those topics, right? So now in high school, there are some now novel based where a lot of those topics, but again, that's not the norm. We've had topics, Romeo and Juliet. That's still, I mean, it's something that the act of what they did maybe would not be from a religious standpoint, but we have those conversations and you kind of navigate through. So I think there's a lot of times books and sort of curriculums that we have, especially as upper grades. And this is where I feel like it's so important now than ever before, having a foundation for our kids to have their understanding of the deen so they can navigate through these, especially in the college level. And even like questioning God, like philosophy, like seeing a lot more kids getting shook. Right. So,
yeah, no, I think whenever I get this question, I'm reminded that in terms of ideas, the most powerful ideas are the ideas that become a part of the fabric of a society, so that people don't even really stop to negotiate them. They don't stop to even think critically about them because they're just a part of the air that they breathe. And, you know, one of the really enjoyable aspects of reading like traditional Islamic books was that many aspects of our faith were just a part of the air that they breathed. It wasn't like something like the existence of God. That was not something that needed to be debated critically. That was like, come on, man. You know, like, really? You know, like, you know, you were much more likely to find early Islamic scholars debating whether or not we actually existed. to find them debating whether or not God existed, right? Like, you know, like, is this all a dream? Is this the Matrix, or is this real?
Wow.
But we know, but we know God is real, right?
Right.
Similarly, there are certain secular, you know, assumptions, presuppositions that are just a part of the air of higher education. And I think the best thing that a Muslim can do is to know that even though these things are being presented to you in the guise of something being natural, right? Like, it's being presented to you in this guise of like, of course, don't you of course. To recognize that that secular perspective comes out of a very particular Western European, by extension American, Enlightenment, post-industrial kind of scientific kind of context. Like, understand the contingency of all of that. That don't allow them to convince you that this is just what human beings naturally do.
Subhanallah.
All right, this is just what intelligent, sophisticated people believe.
Right.
You know, this is a very specific way of understanding life, understanding the world, understanding purpose, understanding the human being. And my deen represents an alternative. It represents a countervailing narrative. It represents, meaning, like, and it doesn't have to even be like argumentative and like something we're always like fighting. It's just recognizing, okay, this is where we disagree. Lakum dinukum waliya din. Like, this is where we disagree. This is where the way we understand fundamentally, the pursuit of happiness or the purpose of life, we differ in that way. And I think to always keep them under the microscope is a way of keeping yourself, clear as a Muslim. The minute they can elude the microscope and you start to think of that perspective as natural, this is when they got you. At that point, they got you. Right. And that can be challenging. And I hope that helps Miriam. We said, Amina said, what are your thoughts on how to best train and educate staff to be able to implement a prophetic pedagogy?
And that's why, how just like in school, when you're teaching profession development, you have to also have development of teachers, even in the faith, right? So, if that means once a week on your group chats, having specific hadiths for the week, if that means, hey, we're going to also or as schools, we push through caught you doing good and saying, look, we want you to keep an eye on kids who are doing well, and let's recognize them throughout the week. Let's recognize other students. If that means, hey, when we have the idea of, after Salah, we have all our men stand, and as the boys walk by, they shake each other's hand because we want to build this relationship that, that we should see each other and so on and so forth. That becomes there. If that means now in class, before every class, that you make dua. So it's not just Islamic studies, but any examining, any class subject, secular, that you have these specific duas that have that. Or when we're walking into, Salah, because one of the big things is that if we ourselves can inculcate, and then, a lot of times, ibadah, no doubt about it. I think with Muslims, when it comes to ibadah, but the mu'amalat, man, that's the key factor. If you really look at the prophetic pedagogy, is that character. If we just have people feel norm, on Fridays I dress up, so there's a lot of like different outfits I have, like Batman, this and that, different hats. So when I first became, the principal, I'm walking around, sometimes kids will be like, oh my God, that's Mr. Khalid, the silly principal, right? So now sometimes parents are like, oh my God, it's like, brother, this is nice, but think about this. When I was back home, when I saw the principal, I would look down. I would be too scared to even look at the principal. And then even ever to go in that room, we would be so scared to even go in there. We had so much respect that we feared the principal that we had to respect. And I said, that's great. It's like, sometimes maybe you want to be very careful because you don't want to have that fear, of the kids should have fear of you. I said, that's great, but I want them to respect me not out of fear. I want them to respect me out of love. And I said, what? And the one who I want to be like is, you tell me one hadith where they said when the Prophet ﷺ was walking by, everybody tried to run away. They all looked down.
Allah.
Sahabas want to be around them. They want to be walking by them.
Allah.
It's huge, right? And so that pedagogy of just being who we are and being nice is part of our deen. And I think somehow when I grew up, sometimes the shuyukh couldn't shake their hands, right? It's just like you just get the fingertips, right?
Yeah.
And they're looking at Assalamu alaikum, right, kind of quick, right? So I was like, well, it's almost like, why can't you be there? It's like, if the Prophet of Allah, anyone could be there, and people thought that he loved him the most, which all, the hadiths where the Sahaba asked, who do you love most? And realized, man, my name's not coming up. But in his mind, he's like, man, I must be the G. I'm like the Prophet's right hand. But that's the beauty. And so that idea of pedagogy, I'm always like, staff, I'm like, look, we have to just make kids to love, because if they're going to have their moments, and that's why the idea of shaking hands every day, I'm like, look, you're going to have that one day you might call that kid out, but the next day you're comforting and not going to walking away and be like, let's shake hands, meet up, what's going on, hey, nice haircut, blah, 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 what's going on, nice socks, those conversations. So that's that pedagogy of understanding, having that teacher relationship that, hey, look, I'm looking at the best for you. I want the best for you in this one and the hereafter. But that means we as ourselves have to be better in muamalat, right? That's what struggles when we were young youth, when a lot of times I have some guys my age like, man, I don't want to deal with a bunch of politics, man, or even Islamic schools, right? When I got there were 7 principals in 14 years. Wow. And so there's just so much going on. I said, when I realized, if you're going to work for the community, the sunnah of Allah is not supposed to be easy. There's going to be moments. Which prophet had it easy? Which prophet? That Prophet Sulaiman, he had the test of being grateful. But everyone else, that's going to be the hustle, right? Excuse my language, but like that, it's that challenge of navigating. And so that's why I think the idea of really telling our, when people come to him and say, look, there's going to be moments. Even when the ulama come, I say, look, you're going to have various views here. This is what we want to do. And when sometimes we have to be more conservative at home and be more liberal in the school, or sometimes be more conservative at school, even though you might be more liberal at home, right? I have to come in and say, okay, is this going to detriment what I'm trying to get across, or or is this going to be overbearing, or do I need to take a lower approach? And that's why those conversations I have, and because I think that helps out, inshallah.
MashaAllah, beautiful, beautiful. Jazakallah kulla khair. Other questions here? We have another.
All right.
We have about 5 more minutes.
Gotta get that.
Get that maghrib. I see you looking out there. Rehana said, just to comment that all the issues mentioned are also of concern in Muslim majority countries. Yeah, this is not, I always say that, although Muslims would have you believe otherwise, America has no monopoly on fitna. It's not, and I know, because I've lived abroad. I lived in Egypt for 5 years. I lived in Yemen. And, a lot of these issues and other issues, you confront there, which is why, don't get me wrong. If a person consciously makes the decision to migrate because they think it's best for them, their family, marhaban bikum. May Allah bless you, bless your migration. And I hope you find what you're looking for. But, the Egyptian poet Ahmed Shawqi, he famously said, never flee from what is in front of you, because what is in the unseen is worse. Right? Never, deal with what is in front of you, because what you can't see is worse. So, we do have very serious challenges, I think, to educating our children effectively as, Americans. But we would be, I think, presumptuous to assume that other people elsewhere don't have challenges. People in Saudi have challenges. People in Yemen have challenges. There the challenge might be, in Yemen, it might be staying alive. Right? People in Syria have challenges. People in Egypt have challenges. People in Burkina Faso have challenges. People in Ghana have challenges. People in Nigeria have challenges. People in Senegal have challenges. So people in Indonesia, they have challenges. So, as you said, hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. God is enough for us, and He suffices as a trustee, as a guarantor, as someone in whom we place our trust. So, mashallah. We have about 3 minutes. I want to give you a final concluding, whatever is on your mind, whatever you'd like to say to the people in attendance. Habib, take it away.
No, Jazakallah khair to Alam. I just want to say, hey, for anyone who hasn't thought about, one of the things is as we get older, and especially college level Alim course, I myself had to, first two years had the opportunity to be there in 2019, 2000, I forgot what the year was. But I think what's key is that, hey, that gives that opportunity for kids, even this Alim opportunity of learning traditional, understanding how this traditional learning happens, but giving that opportunity to push back and really navigate the questions that their challenges they're going through, and saying how beautiful our deen is and how to encompasses all these things that we think oh my God, we never thought about this. So I think that by itself is something, please really look into if some opportunity for at least a child, even the summer. When I say child, I'm talking about college at young age. Apologize, think I'm old or something.
You say people my age, people my age.
Right? Yeah. So inshallah, I think that by itself is one. The second thing is, first, parents never lose hope. Please keep communications with your kids. Keep on making dua for your kids, and we need to advocate and in a respectful way, be proud of what our deen talks about, and then still navigate it in a way that we reaffirm in our kids any questions that they have, or find someone who can help them clarify any questions that they have as you keep on making dua, and never be disappointed. You could be disappointed, but you never reject or come to a point where you're embarrassed that I don't want my kid to be around me. Please don't. As these conversations happen, be open, at least they ask, and then, inshallah, with hikmah and wisdom, be able to answer those, inshallah. And I ask you, make dua for my kids, Ustad Ubaidullah's kids, and all of us, inshallah. May Allah bless you. Jazakallah khair. And may Allah reward all the work you guys are doing at Alim, and especially who's like one of our sheikhs, and the kids like him because he's like the cool sheikh. MashaAllah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.
Jazakallah khair for everybody joining our program today. We just wanted to remind everybody that if you want to learn more about Brother Habib Qadri's work, then he has his website. We put his website in the chat, and it's hqec.net for his consulting services, like educational consulting services. He also has a YouTube channel that we tagged in the chat at The Muslim Minute, which he has like Islamic content for kids and adults. So you can check that out as well, inshallah. We also wanted to let you know that we will put this in the chat, but our Umrah trip is coming up very soon, inshallah. Anna will be doing a Umrah trip with Dr. Jackson, Ustad Ubaidullah, Dr. Munir, and Dr. Adi Suleiman Adi. They will be doing a journey of the Sirah while they are actually at Umrah. So it'll be a Sirah themed Umrah, inshallah, and that is December 16th to the 25th. The spots are going to be closing soon, inshallah. So it's open until September 5th. So you only have about 2 more weeks to register. So we'll put that link in the chat for you, inshallah. But please do check that out. And we also have our book club, and we just want to remind you to keep Anim in your du'as, and you can always go to our website and donate and support our programs, inshallah. So we will see you all next month. All right. Assalamu alaikum.